Good morning and welcome back to The VUU. We have been off for 2 weeks and gosh darn it, we have missed you so much. We're glad that you are here. And let's first everyone do a check-in. I am Joanna Crawford in uncharacteristically frigid Austin, Texas.
Hi everybody, I am Patrice Curtis and I am in Washington, D.C.
I'm Aisha Hauser, and I'm in Seattle, Washington.
I'm Tom Schade, and I'm in cold and frosty Ann Arbor, Michigan.
Hey, and I'm Hank Peirce, and I'm speaking to you from Medford, Mass., where it was so cold they canceled school.
Oh,
and
wow.
somehow I was able to farm out my daughters. My daughters are off at friends' homes this morning, so...
Wow.
Yeah, I was like, jackpot.
Yeah, I'm in your shoes. My partner is out of town this week, but thankfully they have school.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, no, and my wife is in China for 2 weeks, so I'm totally doing daddy duty, right? Which is why I'm growing these big chops right now too, because otherwise Rebecca would be like, "What are you doing?" So
yeah, I saw
my little rebellion.
Apple pie for breakfast. Are yours getting any vegetables at all this week?
Yeah, no, friends keep inviting us over for dinner just to make sure the girls don't, have rickets by the time Rebecca comes back.
And if the invitations start going down, you just put up a picture of something they're eating?
Yeah, exactly, right. Look, look, there's green peas. Look, yeah, no, exactly. Orange soda, it's fruit, right? Isn't that orange?
And
Go ahead.
We are happy to have with us two guests. We only have one, but the other is on her way, Reverend Robin Bartlett. And joining us is Reverend Adam Tierney. Am I pronouncing this right? Tierney, Elliot?
Yeah, good job.
Okay, good. And okay,
we're a part of the country where there aren't a lot of Irish. That's good. Yeah,
exactly right. We don't have anything. Yeah, it's confusing. Texas, not a whole lot down here. And Adam, if you could just for a second kind of move your head so that people can see what's behind you. Whoa, okay. So that gives you.
I'll be facing it today. And now we've lost all of our vampire viewers.
Exactly.
So it looks like Robin might have joined us.
Yes, Robin's a little blue.
Coming in.
She ran away.
So while we're waiting for her to get
Who's
here,
behind that chalice?
Oh yes. We a long time. You can never really leave the CLF. It's kind of like the firm. And Scott, you want to come out from behind the chalice and give us a quick wave? He's like, no.
No, yeah. Oh, there he is.
And that was a very quick wave because bless his heart, as we say down here, but really he's also dealing with strep throat. So what kind of germs and what all is going on in your neck of the woods?
I should have started off by saying that it's frigid here too. It was reported out in Reston, Virginia this morning. It was 4 degrees.
Wow.
On a Tuesday night, they said we're going to get was it Tuesday or Monday night? Tuesday night. On Tuesday night, they said we're going to get a dusting of snow. And when we all woke up, schools were closed. It was more like an inch or two. And it was quite cold. It was, I think the high yesterday was 21. So we're having some very, very, very cold weather. And last night, some of you know that the movie Selma is out.
Mm-hmm.
And the former associate minister of All Souls Church here in D.C. is actually mentioned. There's actually a character, and he actually ends up being murdered just like he was in real life in the movie. And so some of us gathered, about 50 or 60 of us gathered at Metro, and it was about 15 degrees, and had a prayer, and then walked a couple blocks to the to a theater and watched the movie together.
Wow.
Why don't you mention his name? Why don't you say his name?
James Reeb, thanks. Reverend James Reeb, who at the time that he went to Selma had decided that community ministry called to his heart more than parish ministry. So he had left All Souls at that point, and answered the call that Martin Luther King put out. So yeah, it was a really stirring evening, and of course, when James Reeb in the movie, introduced himself, there was clapping clapping in the theater, and it wasn't just us in the theater. So we all had a chance to whisper to the person next to us why these people were suddenly clapping, because of course nobody knew who James Reeb was, so they didn't understand. So it was kind of a nice teaching moment, and I made sure to mention Unitarian Universalist in there. Thinking of Joanna, and living out loud. So yeah, that's so that was really fun. And it for Californian, serving here for a year, I could not believe all the people that were out while it was so cold, and I couldn't believe how many people really weren't wearing that much. Me, I had on 1, 2, 3, 4. I had on 6 layers. 6 layers of clothes, 2 pairs of mittens and gloves. I mean, hat, earmuffs. I'm sure it looked silly, but I was warm. So.
And I am glad that Reverend Robin Bartlett is also joining us. And Robin, we're just kind of checking in about the weather and whatnot is happening in our town. Where is it where you are? Oh, got you on mute.
Oh no. Oh wait, I'll speak for her.
Hey, can you hear me now?
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm in Sterling, Massachusetts. It's 2 degrees.
Holy moly!
And
it's up in the hills.
Also, it is too cold for the internet to work at my church, which is why I'm late. I had to run back to the parsonage to get in the fall. I'm sorry.
Glad you're here. Okay, our regulars, what else is happening in your towns?
Well, I have to report that I had my daughter had her first granddaughter in early December, or in early December. Yes, maybe late November.
She had her daughter, your granddaughter. She didn't have a granddaughter. You're not a great grandfather.
No, right? That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
He's a fine grandfather, just not a great.
I try to be. And so little Kylie Rose, hit the planet, and we're super excited. And I have another one coming about the time of Institute out in Los Angeles. So my other daughter is also going to have a baby. So that's like, we're living in that world. We're living in that world. So my wife has a baby blanket she's supposed to crochet by the time this third grandchild comes, and she hasn't really started it. And now we got the news that the baby's probably going to be like 2 weeks early. So it's like she's moving into panic time here pretty soon. I think she's going to subcontract the crocheting out to me during the day, So.
I was going to say, wasn't there kind of some big news about your other half? Didn't I see something on Facebook?
Yeah, my Sue was designated or awarded or named the Healthcare CIO of the Year, and which is a big deal for people who do that kind of stuff. She's the Healthcare CIO for the University of Michigan Hospital right now, and so this is a Lifetime Achievement Award, and so she's very happy and proud. And I'm really proud of her, so. She married better than I did, so, No, I married better than she did. That's what I'm trying to say.
We're going to have to cut that.
Cut that out. Don't worry, she doesn't watch the
I was going to say put it on a loop,
Like all of our spouses, right, Tom? She doesn't watch.
Yeah, really. I mean, come on, fess up.
Okay, so Aisha, I know you have a funny story, and all of us who are freezing, we need some laughter to warm us up. Tell us your funny story. It's so funny, we can't hear it.
Uh-oh.
Her story froze on the way from Seattle back east.
Crossing Montana.
I'm not muted. I don't know why. Okay, you can hear me?
We can hear you now.
Okay. So my family went away skiing for the weekend, and it's actually in the 40s and 50s here, so we're not freezing. So you have to drive about 5 hours to actually see snow. So they were gone over the weekend, over break, and I was on my own in Seattle, and I hadn't really explored downtown yet. So I came across a show called Homo for the Holidays. So it was a burlesque starring Ben de la Creme, a drag queen from the show, RuPaul show. So I texted my daughter and she's like, Mom, how are you? What are you doing? We're having fun. I said, oh, I'm at Homo for the Holidays. And I kind of just left it at that. And she's like, okay. And she comes home and she's like, so you had a nice weekend, Mom? I'm like, yeah. And she said, so we didn't kind of understand. So you were gay for the weekend? Like, we didn't know what you were doing. And I'm like, no, sweetheart. I said, Homo for the Holidays is a show. And she's like, yeah, we didn't understand. We just thought you were kind of gay for the weekend. So
just for the holidays. Just
for the holidays. And I'm like, wow, so my family thought I was gay for the weekend and kind of really were okay with it because no one seemed, they were kind of more puzzled than anything else. And I'm like, what is it?
This may just open up so many opportunities for you now.
I was like, what is it about me that my family would get a text like that, my teenage daughter, mind you, and be like, oh, Mom's gay for the weekend. Okay. And that was it.
Maybe it's just a weekend thing. It's just a weekend thing.
It's the way we raised them. My youngest two were playing with Barbies one time, and there's never enough Ken dolls, and so one was trying to find a Ken doll, couldn't find a Ken doll, and finally was like, okay, fine, I'll just be lesbian, and grabs another doll. It's like, okay.
Exactly. So that tickled me. That's my funny story. Homo for the holidays.
Whatever you do, do not Google that term.
Or make sure your filters are pretty tight when you do.
Yeah, right, exactly, yeah. You don't want to see those ads showing up on your Facebook page in the sideline.
So Hank, word on the street is that you have been consorting with strange characters like UU-UCC sort of blend, or it's kind of like a hybrid or something, a transformer. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's all bad. We're all regressing. And in a minute we'll talk about we'll have Robin and Adam talk. Right now, I'm part of a study group for ministers, and I'm doing a paper this year, and part of it is talking about the sort of what happened when sort of universalism got universalized. Sort of the small U universalism, where we became where sort of from Ken Patton on, that sense of like. You're looking at all world religions and that sort of thing, and and the problem with, there's issues. There are a lot of issues with that, but one of the issues is that it's hard to go in any direction from there without seeming like you're going backwards, right? Without people going, well, we were embracing all world religions, and now you are just, you're focusing on just one. You're just going backwards, unless we become like Scientologists and we're worshiping UFOs. It's hard to, keep going, make people think that we're progressing in one way. That said,
something against Scientologists? Come on.
I'm just saying.
First, we're trying to find room, in the front for their symbol. So.
That's right.
And the aliens, the Pope thinks it's okay if there are aliens. So hey, I think that's unexplored territory for us.
All life matters. All life forms matter. Go ahead.
Anyway, so for 2 years, I served a church in Westford, Massachusetts. That was a United Church. It was a church that, like many of the Unitarian Universalist churches here in New England and in Eastern Massachusetts, had started off, was sort of founded by the Puritans, and then in the 1820s. Split, and so you had Unitarians had one building, and the folks who became sort of the Congregationalists and later the United Church of Christ had their own separate church building. But then about sort of 100 years after their split, they got back together, they realized it was too expensive to have two different ministers when they could just have one. So they got back together, and so now and it was really interesting to serve a church that had two real distinct histories and two real distinct theologies, or and at least two, and so we thought that it would be great to speak to a couple of our colleagues who are serving churches that have at least two different denominational affiliations, and so that's why we have Robin, who's serving a federated church in Sterling, Mass, and Adam, who's serving a united church in South Natick, Massachusetts. But why don't we first have you two, Adam and Robin, describe your churches a little bit, so to help people understand what the dynamics are of your church, and then I think there are a bunch of other questions that people have, like, really, Jesus, really? So, but Robin, why don't you go first?
Okay. So as Hank said, I'm serving a. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. As Hank said, I'm serving a federated church in Sterling, Massachusetts, which is near Worcester. It's a very small town, and it's a town of about 8,000 people, but we're rather a regional church and pretty large for a town so small. So we have about 275 members right now and growing. And this is a church actually that is more than just federated. It is affiliated with both the United Church of Christ and the Unitarian Universalist Association, but it's also what they call interdenominational. It used to be affiliated with the American Baptists as well, and over 50% of my congregants refer to themselves as interdenominational, which is how my church differs a little bit from Adam's. I have a large amount of theological diversity in my church, largely because there are people in my church who identify as Baptist and UCC and Quaker and Lutheran and just generic Protestant and just members of this church, and they don't want a label slapped on them, and folks who would like to retain their old denominational ties, but for them this is just their town church, and they want to connect with other people in the town around Christianity. We became federated with the three denominations and eventually four denominations, so the American Baptist, the United Church of Christ, the Unitarian Universalist Association, and interdenominational. So at one time there were four separate groups, and they came together all during World War II out of necessity. Hank mentioned this before. It was necessity because the ministers of the town had to go off and be chaplains. So the Unitarians very kindly let everybody come to their church, and they adopted the motto, in essentials unity and non-essentials free liberty, and in all things charity. And that was how they decided to be together and to function well together as a multi-denominational church. And so they came together out of the essential fact that the town was shrinking because of the war, and they decided that they would be together and live in all their ways. They share the covenant, the old Unitarian Ames covenant, which is in the love of truth and in the spirit of Jesus we unite for the worship of God and the service of humankind. And they still use that covenant. And so the one thing that they really share is that they come together in the spirit of Jesus. They use Christian symbols to unite for the worship of God. But other than that, it is wildly theologically diverse. And certainly I've served 6 different Unitarian Universalist churches and grew up Unitarian Universalist. And I have never been in such a theologically and politically diverse church, economically diverse church in my entire life in terms of service. So I do believe that our church is a model for how to do church well, and I hope that we'll talk about that today.
No, I'm sorry, we're not. You're done. Thank you. Adam, why don't you tell us a little bit about the Elliot Church? Let me also just say, Adam's name is, his last name is Tierney Elliot, and he serves the Elliot Church. There's no connection there, but I do want to point that out. That yes, everyone realizes that.
Yeah.
But Adam, why don't you talk about your church, and also could you also explain the difference between United and Federated too?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, yes, the name thing is weird, and some people usually think I'm a member of a cult or something, but the church has been here for a long time. There were 2 separate congregations. Actually, they were together at one point in 1828, and then they split off, and then they came back together in 1945. The 2 denominations urged the 2 separated churches. This was then Unitarian, and the other church was the one I'm in now. And the other one was what was then known as Congregational Christian Churches, which is one half of the United Church of Christ. The denominations wanted them to merge with the churches in Sherborn so that they could have the money from the sale of the buildings here in Natick, but that well, we're a provincial people here, and so Christology was easily conquered in favor of not having to visit those people in Sherborn, who I understand they didn't like very much. So that's what happened in 1945, and we merged for very non-theological reasons. Over time, we start actually as a federated church. Essentially, the difference, and there's like, you know, think of a continuum, right? So there's like a lot of different ways you can cut this, but a federated church maintains some distinction between the various congregations that make it up. So you could have, for example, at Elliot, which is a little simpler than talking about the Sterling Church because it has a lot of different parts. At Elliot, in 1945, when the 2 joined, there was a specific church, a congregation within this congregation that was part of what is now we call the United Church of Christ, and a portion that was part of the Unitarian Universalists, or what we now call Unitarian Universalists. They had separate annual meetings and separate budgets, and then there would be another annual meeting of the 2 together to do like relevant things like hiring ministers and setting the real budget and having staff and planning out what's actually going to happen, which is a little unwieldy. So in the 90s, I think it was 1997, Walter Kring, who was the minister here at the time, and the congregation decided to become a united church, which just basically flips the whole thing. Like we are all members at Elliot Church of the Elliot Church, and then the church is a member of 2 denominations. So we don't keep separate membership rolls. If you ask a member of the Elliot Church, which are you, Unitarian, Universalist, or United Church of Christ, they won't know what you're talking about because we're all members of Elliot. So that's where it's different. And otherwise, all those lovely things that Robin said are true about us too. It's a very diverse congregation. We have many, many different views. I remember one time, it was a while ago, someone asked me, you know, how many members of your church are Christian? And I said, well, all the members of our church are Christian. It's just that some of those Christians are atheists. And that's so essentially our range from probably more traditional orthodoxy to you know, secular humanists. But everyone does kind of expect to, you know, you hear the Bible, you have to sort of come to terms with Christian language, and that sort of thing. I should say that I'm not really trying to make a point with the cross. It just happens to be there because this is the warmest spot in the church. Actually, my intern Shane is sitting behind me, huddled up. You know, he's covered in blankets. We'll wake him up before.
Let's see him. Let's see him. Come on.
Oh, sure. Shane, come say hi.
Hi, everyone. I'm also tech support for Adam, too.
Yes, which I need. But did that answer your question, Hank, or was there something else?
Yeah. No, that's great. And do you always keep your interns like on the floor, like
I was
below
going to
you?
say,
Yeah,
we cannot pass that up. What is up with the intern on the floor?
On Sundays, they just no. I'm actually standing in the pulpit. He's in the the pulpit throne behind me.
It gets better.
Yeah. That's what we do here. We have problems with authority, so we have to stay in the pulpit.
So it gives you a confidence, right? A lot of confidence.
Exactly. Yeah. That and warmth.
So for both of y'all, what is a Sunday morning like at your church?
At least for me, I think my Sunday morning is very sermon sandwich. I mean, like a worship service. I mean that in a good way. I think at times when Unitarian Universalists or people from UCC or UU churches come here, there's some things that are a little different for both. We usually have a Bible reading, could be New or Old Testament, and then a reading from something else. Sometimes from a different world religion. The Quran is popular here, and sometimes, what's her name? What's the poet we like?
Ann Weems.
Yeah, Ann Weems.
And the UU one.
The UU one.
Mary Oliver.
Mary Oliver. Yeah, so sometimes we do that, that stuff too. Usually the Bible passage is the more preachy one, but not always. And the other ones tend to comment back, oh yeah, and William Sloane Coffin. We love William Sloane Coffin.
Now, do you use the lectionary at all, Adam?
No, we do. It's just a worship committee picks a theme. Right now, Shane and I are working our way through Mark, one pericope from each chapter of Mark, -3 till we can end on Easter. We're practical people that way.
And I would say that my Sunday morning is slightly, I guess, more traditional than Adam's. Although I don't think of our church as traditional. It's very progressive Christian. But I do preach from the lectionary, mostly not because I have to, actually, mostly because I love the Revised Common Lectionary more than anything in the world. It just helps me with everything, and it helps me plan my year and all of my themes, and I just can't imagine working without it at this point. But anyway, I don't have to do that. My congregation is incredibly flexible. It has been served by only sort of progressive, innovative Christian types, and so they really are so flexible. They take communion once a month. I think Adam does too. So we do communion on the first Sunday of every month, service of Holy Communion, and that changes how we do it. Sometimes we do it by intinction, meaning we dip our bread in a cup, and sometimes we pass with our communion silver to people sitting next to us in the pews. But communion is very important to my congregation. There's as many opinions about communion as there are about everything else. So I've preached we read 2 Bible passages, usually one from the Psalms and one from the Gospels, although we sometimes do a passage from the Hebrew Bible. It depends on what I want to preach on from the lectionary. And we have a lot of great music, a fabulous pipe organ and a choir, and people who love brass. There's a lot of horns playing in my church all the time, and the choir wears robes. So I suppose in some ways we're rather traditional, but actually very lively and vibrant. So it's funny how you can be both contemporary and traditional at the same time, but I think I have sort of a mix of people who love contemporary worship and who love traditional worship, so we try to mix it all in together.
Yeah, it was interesting for me when I was serving in Westford, because they hadn't had a Unitarian Universalist minister since 1969, and so then I show up in 2013, and it was and me just sort of kind of going, oh, we're not going to necessarily do that. Actually, the previous minister, who was UCC, was very innovative and great. But it was definitely an interesting thing for everybody to get used to. Me, reading poetry, as opposed to always, reading scriptural passage. Now, could you talk a little bit about your status? I know both of you, Adam and I went to seminary together, and I was just at Robin's ordination and installation, so I know that you're both ordained as Unitarian Universalist ministers. What is your status in the UCC, and what would it be the other way around, too?
Oh, sorry.
No,
Adam,
go ahead. No, you talk. You're a good talker. Go ahead.
I have dual standing in both. Well, I'm ordained a Unitarian Universalist minister, and I have dual standing in the United Church of Christ, which I have to tell you was a lot easier than it was to become a Unitarian Universalist minister, only because in the UCC they not automatically but pretty easily grant you dual standing just for serving one of their churches. Getting privilege of call in the United Church of Christ is an entirely different story. Then you have to go through more of their credentialing process, and also you have to renounce your Unitarian Universalist minister standing. And privilege of call simply means
one drop of blood from your fingertip is and you've given that up.
Wait, that is interesting.
So they really easily grant you dual standing. Just if you're serving one of their churches in the United Church, to bring you, in with open arms, and they enthusiastically support you, and they invite you to everything. They are so wonderful. But if I wanted to leave this church one day and serve another United Church of Christ church, I would have to go through a big process. Probably not as intense as the one that I did to get ordained in the first place, because they would recognize my ordination. But I would have to go through a process that actually Adam knows more about, I'm sure. So he could tell you more about this. I just became a UCC minister in October. So I'm still getting to know the United Church of Christ. Adam is intimately familiar with them.
Nice, thanks. That's yeah, I also have dual standing. I am probably more, well, I've been doing this. I've been at this church for 11 and a half years. I've had dual standing for most of that time. And just the way things worked, partly because the local association, the central association that both my church and Robin's church are members of, is very friendly and welcoming. I've probably served on more committees and whatnot in the UCC at this point than in the UUA. And I think what Robin said is roughly what happens. I mean, if you were to move through the process, it's a little different. They don't have a national they don't have an equivalent to the fellowship committee. Everything's done regionally, either by conference, or if you're in a small conference, or by association, which is a whole level that we don't have. So, it gets confusing. But by association in a larger place like here. But yeah, I mean, Robin, I knew you'd be a good talker, Robin. I can't think of too much to add, but that's. I mean, that's basically the case, and they have been very welcoming. And like I said, I've served on a variety of committees, Central Association Board, delegate to General Synod, which is kind of like General Assembly, but more work gets done. Partly because it's true. It's partly because they pay your way if you're so you feel obligated to go to meetings, things like that.
So Robin mentioned earlier that something about communion silver. And I have to say that I almost became known as the intern who lost the communion silver because I was put in charge of the Maundy Thursday service, which I'm guessing that maybe both of you have a Maundy Thursday service.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And so there's a silver that was purchased by the women First Unitarian, Portland, Oregon, back in, oh gosh, I want to say the 1800s, but maybe not that long ago. But some of the founding, sort of the founding mothers, and so it's very precious silver. And it went missing for a period of time.
No.
You know, it was probably about 4 hours, so it wasn't a long time, but it was enough to scare the bejesus out of me. Where is the silver? So,
Funny.
luckily
I have
I
a
avoided
question.
that, but it became kind of a little bit of a running joke amongst my colleagues, as you know. You were almost the intern who lost the silver.
Aisha, go ahead.
I jump in
Can
real
you-
quick because I have a silver thing. One of the things that makes you have these little rituals that you try to do to bring in both traditions, and we actually have 2 sets of communion silver. And neither is actually silver because we're practical people and it's mostly like plate or chrome. But every once in a while we have to pull out the Trinitarian set, which we do on Monday, Thursday. I have never lost it. Sorry.
Okay, Aisha, go ahead.
Okay, can you hear me? I have a question about children and worship and how often you do multi-generationals and the attitudes of your congregations to children.
Well, actually, I have been bringing children into worship more than have been brought in before at First Church in Sterling, as far as I know. I've found this church to be similar to most of the Unitarian Universalist churches that I've served, in that children have religious education classes offered at the same time as worship. They come in for the first 15 minutes and then they leave. So we've been doing more and more multi-generational services in which we use a lot more ritual and a lot more singing, and it is my hope, one day over the course of my tenure that all worship services are multi-generational and we have adult and children religious education at a separate time. But I don't think that that there's anything unique about my church in terms of its approach to multi-generational ministry, except that they hired a former director of religious education to be their minister.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I can't think of anything that would make our church terribly different. I think the UCC congregations do a very similar thing to UU.
Yeah, they do.
As kids are concerned. I mean, the only thing that we're particularly unique, that makes us particularly unique, is our intergenerational ukulele ministry. But I'm not sure that's either Christian or non-Christian. That's just us.
I don't think that's Trinitarian.
Do you all do coming of age or confirmation? What do the 13-year-olds do?
Confirmation in my church. I lead the confirmation class of about 15 kids, which is really interesting actually in a federated church. I had only one youth from the last year's confirmation class who wanted to be confirmed Unitarian Universalist. Only one of I don't know, there were 15 of them last year too. And it was interesting because she had never been baptized. And she asked me, do I have to be baptized in order to be confirmed Unitarian Universalist? Because the previous interim minister, who was United Church of Christ, told her that she had to. And I said, actually, you don't have to be baptized in order to come of age in the Unitarian Universalist Association. And if you don't feel like you want to be baptized right now, you truly don't have to be. And this was a revelation to more than one person, because of course confirmation means confirmation of baptism, and not, most of the folks in my church have been baptized, even the Unitarian Universalists, because they have a strong tradition of baptism. We even have a full immersion baptism font in our basement because we used to be a Baptist church as well, and all of the ministers who have served this church in the last 50 years have been Baptist. So they have a very, very strong tradition of baptism. So my first baptism here in Sterling was a 12-year-old girl who wanted to be baptized Unitarian Universalist by full immersion in the lake. And so the first baptism that I did here in Sterling was a UU 12-year-old in the lake by full immersion. We sang Down to the River to Pray. We wore our robes. I didn't do the triune formula and the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit as I dunked her. I only dunked her once instead of 3 times, and that's how I made it Unitarian. But I have to say, I went online and one of our collegial Facebook groups, and I said to folks, "Hey, does anybody have a liturgy for a full immersion baptism for Unitarian Universalists?" And they said, "No, but when you write it, could you please send it to us?"
I am guessing because Universalists used to do full immersion. I remember reading in an old newspaper account from the late 1800s. Someone was describing how the Universalists danced and sang their way down to some local creek, and this particular account was saying those crazy Universalists who don't think they need hell. Right, that was a tenor of it. So they crazily danced through the woods down to the creek, and there are many baptisms that took place. So that's totally cool. You've taken a page out of history, or you are taking pages out of history. So it's more Universalist though than Unitarian though.
Absolutely, and it was one of my favorite things that I've done in ministry so far. It was amazing.
Awesome.
That's very cool.
As you were describing that, I imagine that there are people who are watching this right now, like jaws are dropping. People going like, "What?
What?
That's child abuse."
Honestly, it sounds cool to me. I think if you started offering that, people would go for it just because of the creek and the trees and the whole 9 yards. I think
And we do. I imagine there's also some people watching that going, "Oh, cool! I want to know more about that," because I don't know about for y'all, but I'm in my very just UU church. There are definitely some people who are wanting, more ritual, more of these religious touchstones.
Throw some stuff in there about the interdependent web and the nature and all that stuff. People read some Mary Oliver,
Yeah.
Stapled in the back of the Bible, and a lot of you.
So going theologically, Robin and Adam, I have a question about the Christology of your churches and the whole Trinity thing. What kind of language are you using in your services? Not just specifically about the Trinity, but do you usually refer to Jesus as God? How do you handle it?
I think it's actually, you'd be surprised the number of times where it doesn't come up.
Yes.
Very, very rarely in the sermon. For starters, homiletically, at least for me, I preach biblical sermons. And I use biblical language, but I don't think anyone, I can't think of any UCC minister, honestly, who would, during a sermon go, "Oh, by the way, Jesus is God." Right? It's just not the language to actually in the context, right? So you have your passage and you exegete your passage, and very rarely does that most of the stuff in the Bible does not naturally lead to Jesus. Therefore, it's reading the Bible. Therefore, Jesus is God. So it just doesn't come up more than anything else. I rarely use the term. Use Jesus' last name, Christ. But again, just because it's not really topical. It's not something I'm avoiding. It just doesn't come up thematically. I guess in a way I've self-selected that, in a subconscious level, but that's sort of where that is. I just wanted to, if I could, just go back a little bit because you're all chatty, so I let you do that. But I just wanted to say something real quick about the confirmation and baptism thing, because we do this a little differently in a United Church, because you're not baptized or confirmed into either the UUA or the UCC in our church. You become a member of the Elliot Church. So that's also just never a question we ask the kids. Are you a Trinitarian? We do ask them, but in a much more casual way, like, hey, what do you think God is? In that good sort of youth minister way. Shane's right here. He does that part. But that's sort of what anyone would do in any coming of age program. So in that way we do, and some of them turn out to be Trinitarians, probably more. But anyway, I digress a little bit, but it just doesn't come up. Oh yeah, Shane wants me to show you this.
Their best representation.
God is whatever this is. That. Made this picture. We keep it in the office. We think it's an angel. It's very pretty.
So I'll take a stab at that question, Joanna. This is the freest I have ever felt in a church to express both my Unitarian theology and my Universalist theology, because I grew up Unitarian Universalist, and I know no other way to be. So I'm both a Unitarian Christian and a Universalist Christian, and I find it so much easier to preach Unitarian Universalism in my UCC church. Strangely enough, or in my multi-denominational church, I understand God to be bigger than any one religion, which is how I understand Unitarianism, and I understand God to be love, which is how I understand Universalism, and that is what preaches at my church. It doesn't matter how you say it, as long as you are over and over again saying God is love and God is still speaking, then that is just, to me, that sums up Unitarian Universalism. I know it doesn't sum up Unitarian Universalism to a lot of other people. I grew up in a humanist church, and I know how sort of Orthodox UUism works. But this is, to me, this is the most freedom I've ever had theologically. What I have found is that Christian symbols mean different things to different people in my church, and the most important thing is that we have this shared symbol system. So Jesus means something totally different to the Unitarians in my church, maybe, than it means to the Trinitarians in my church, but it doesn't matter. We have this shared symbol system. I say the word Jesus, and I mean something by Jesus and incarnation and God. And then there are people in my church that map on totally different meanings to that. And that is the beauty of fostering theological diversity within a very specific narrative and a very specific theological hermeneutic, to use a very seminary-ish term, sorry, but I just mean like a lens through which we read this narrative, a lens through which we understand this set of symbols is important. And my people have, some of them are literalists, and some of them believe that this is all symbol. I have atheists, like a lot of them. But to them, Jesus is important, and Jesus is important for different reasons. God is important as a concept, at least, but God is important for different reasons for different people. I think this is true in every Unitarian Universalist church. You have as many orthodoxies as you have people in the room. And my church just happens to use a Christian set of symbols and narratives in order to make sense of that theological diversity. It's actually a wonderful tool to be able to talk about theological diversity and how we're different. What comes down to it, our new mission statement that we're using is that we are gathered in the spirit of Jesus, committed to creating heaven on earth. So regardless of what people think of the afterlife, we have a this worldly theology, which to me sums up Unitarian Universalism in a nutshell. I think our church is more Unitarian Universalist than a lot of Unitarian Universalist churches I've been in. And they wouldn't understand themselves that way, but I say that all the time to my small band of 30 UU folks who claim to be UU in my church. I say it all the time. This is the most Unitarian Universalist church I've ever been in. There's a freedom from orthodoxy here.
I get what you mean, because in Worcester, which is just down the road from you, which is not a federated church, but a purely Unitarian Universalist church out of the Unitarian tradition, we use the same covenant you use in Sterling. We read the Bible. They read the Bible. I have to give up the pulpit there eventually. Right? Our colleague Sarah Stewart is their minister. I have to remind myself of that, but that's just me. They read the Bible. They say the Lord's Prayer, and it's filled with atheists and Buddhists and Jewish people and some Muslims and all of that. It's as theologically diverse, and yet it still kind of works within that frame. I mean, some people can't work in that frame, and they shouldn't try to if they can. Why go to a church that makes you crazy? It should push you in better ways than that. But,
Yes.
Yeah, but that's that traditional. Actually, that's just the theistic branch of Unitarian Universalism, which has always been present and never went away, even at the greatest height of the kind of humanist hegemony.
Thing.
You know, thing. Right? That
word.
I was going to use the phrase "the humanist captivity," but I thought that was I'll say it now with laughter, right? But
I do think. I wanted to say one thing, because Robin does have literalists. She has said, like, biblical literalists. I don't. I'm not sure we have literalist anything in my church, to be honest. Yeah. You know, there is a sense in which there is a unified theology, at least in my congregation, but it is a largely, for lack of a better way to put it, sort of transcendentalist Christian one. Mm-hmm. There's a very metaphorical theology that does bind people together. But since I preach Bible from the Bible and not from a theology, I think there are other people who may have different within the congregation, but we don't have any actual literal anything.
Yeah, there are lots of people that are. Yeah. Go ahead.
Maybe I think we might be going on the same direction. This morning I got an email from the UUA, and it had a picture of Peter Morales, the president of our association, and Joffrey Black, who's the president of the United Church of Christ. And I know that for a lot of folks, a lot of Unitarian Universalists, when they see pictures of our these two presidents together, that they start to freak out. Right?
Merger.
We're going to be eaten up. This is it. And so, you know, I've got my own opinions, but I wanted to hear what other folks, you know, because there's always that talk. And Robin, you have a funny story that happened after your installation. Claire Thorne Feingold, who gave a wonderful sermon talking about being in a church with dual affiliations, and she sort of said, like, oh, and one day there will be a you know, our denominations will merge. But I'd love to hear from you guys what you think about this, and also what do UCC people think about this in New England, outside of New England. You know, I'm sure that for a lot of people, like, let me say, in my church that I'm serving right now is the interim minister in Milton. We have communion every month. You know, in Westford we had communion every month. Tom had communion in Worcester every month. Robin and Adam have communion every month. That for a lot of Unitarian Universalists, hearing that, it is crazy. That is the most insane thought they've ever had. And certainly the Unitarian Universalist church that I grew up in New Bedford, they hadn't had communion since the 1840s. You know, so. But I know that for a lot of folks, it's like it's like it's otherworldly, like we're talking Martian language stuff. But back to the UCC, UU, you know, merger, consolidation, whatever. What do you guys think?
Hey, let me go first because this is Robin's favorite topic, and so I'll be brief. and then you can talk us out. But I think a merger would be fine. I don't think it's going to happen. Claire's younger than me. She actually said that it would happen while she was still in the ministry, right? That she was still active. I'm older. Probably happen after I'm retired. But I think partly the newfound interest is one that's generated, I suspect, partly from an interest in, you know, shared whatevers and good stuff, but probably also just an economic one. Hey, where can we share stuff and save some money? Because they don't seem to be talking about the things that you would talk about with merger. We just talked about the weird standing settlement thing, and like how do you go from one denomination to another denomination, which would actually be very helpful, not just for federated churches, but for UU Christian churches and progressive Christian churches in the UCC. And they're not talking about any of that. Like it's like we don't exist when they talk about this. They're talking about standard form UUs working with standard form UCC churches to do something that will save some money, cut a couple staff positions, and make things more streamlined, I think. So I don't really see this as something that's going to happen anytime soon. There's a lot of good reasons to do it, but you know, and I think that, but I'd be surprised. But I'm a cynical person. So, Robin.
Well, I mean, it is my favorite topic, but I agree with you, Adam. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. I do want to recommend that you watch Claire Feingold Thoren's video, which is on YouTube. If you go to the First Church in Sterling YouTube page, if you Google that, just watch Claire Feingold Thoren's sermon. It's fabulous, and at least you can see what we're talking about. It's from my installation.
Site too,
yeah, to put it up on the CLF site, because it's really worth watching. I'm not sure. I think that there will be a merger, but look, I think that that my church came together again out of necessity, because it was essential to come together. And I think some of our best marriages work like that. You come together because you're forced to, and then you work it out in this beautiful, beautiful way. And I want to say. Wait, I want to say something, and this is what I think is vitally important. I think we are living in a post-denominational world, and we haven't quite realized it yet in Unitarian Universalism. And I think there are some major differences in the Church Universal, and those major differences are pretty binary, actually. They are the progressive church, and they are the conservative or fundamentalist church, which are two different things, I know. But there are some major differences between those two things, and we share some missional important opportunities with so much of the progressive mainline Protestant church, as well as the Reformed Jews. I mean, any of the Reformed churches. We share so much in common. We need to focus on those things right now. In unity, we need to work together to actually progress some of our shared causes, which are most of our shared causes. And so I actually am I'm passionate about this mostly because I think it's going to be an essential thing as the church dies, as the liberal mainline church dies, that we actually unify with other people who are actually not that different from us. My goodness. But there are some people who have very different ideologies than we have, and we do need to differentiate ourselves from them, not from each other. Protestantism is so dumb like that. Just this narcissism of small differences. Some call it
UCC requires a UU minister to forego being a UU minister.
What that looks like is another story.
The thing I think about this.
Let's let Tom speak. Yeah.
The thing I think about this is I don't think you're going to merge congregations except in some places, and I think that it's going to be very hard to merge up at the denominational level. But I think that you could create a common ministerial organization across all of the progressive liberal religions.
Yeah.
Amen.
We were in a situation where we met regularly with the progressive liberal Baptists, with the Reformed Jewish rabbi, and that we saw ourselves as a common ministry for liberal religion with theological and organizational differences. We could go really far, and that's all in our hands as ministers. Absolutely. You do not need the get into the lawyers and the endowments and all of that mess at the denominational level. And we don't need to go to people lay leaders in their church who go, we've been building this church for 50 years and now you're saying we should merge with those people across town? No, that's not going to happen. But the ministers, a common liberal religious ministry, would be an incredibly progressive force in the country. And we could do some real good.
That would be fantastic.
And with that is the good news. And any parting words, folks, as we get ready? We've got like just a minute or so before we sneak out of here.
Thanks a lot. This was great.
Thanks. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for having me. This was fun. Shane thanks you too. You can have his computer
turn
back.
on the floor.
Shane can now get off the floor, get off his knees.
Yeah,
exactly.
Take his computer.
Exactly.
This has been great. Thank y'all both very much for joining us. I feel like we could get, we could go on and on with this, and probably will. We'll probably be asking y'all to come back. I think that we just hit on so many good topics during this, and I would love to know more about you know, what you're doing and how it's working, and, you know, how the self-selection that happens when you have a cross in your church, you know, what does that mean? So thank you for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Stay warm.